Welcome to TrulyFit.
Eoin, thank you so much for joining the TrulyFit Podcast. Why don't you give my listeners and audience a little background on who exactly you are and what you do in the health and fitness industry day to day?
Great, Steve. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. My name's Eoin Everard. I'm a chartered physiotherapist or physical therapist over in the States. I'm a lecturer here in Ireland as well. I lecture on biomechanics and kind of sports medicine. And then I'm a Pilates instructor as well. We have an online Pilates course called everardpilates.com, specializing in sports Pilates. So, and then main kind of hobby, I suppose, at this stage would be running. I'm like a sub 4 minute miler, sub 14 minutes, so 13:58 for 5K and then 29:50 for 10K.
Wow, that's quite amazing. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking mostly about running, but I want to go back to some things you first said. I also have a Pilates background. I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, so I have never kept my certification up because I don't really work in facilities anymore, but I was a level 2 peak Pilates, reformer certified. So I've worked on reformers basically from the age of, let's say, 26 until 34. I'm now 37. So for the last 3 years, I haven't. I just sort of changed my career and lifestyle a little bit, but Pilates was very important to me as I was learning the fitness industry because, number one, it really helped me with cueing. It does a better job than, let's say, your average just weightlifting certifications with understanding where the body is and how to move joints in full range of motion and really how to engage muscles and diaphragmatic breathing and those sorts of things. Does it also help with running? Do you feel like understanding Pilates and the basics of Pilates helps you as a runner or training to run?
Yeah, definitely. I think the importance of Pilates is what you said there, in terms of gives that baseline, that, that good movement patterns and being aware of your body and like good technique essentially that can then be used in the gym for more like, work capacity or anatomical adaptation, doing reps 10 to 15. Where it helps with runners is running is very passive injuries, like so plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis. It's a lot of load through the body, and the muscles don't necessarily activate on their own with running. So it's where it really helps is it can help activate the muscles, and that can help with two things. One, it reduces the injury risk because now the muscles are awake essentially or activated to help take some of the pressure off the ligaments, the joints and the tendons. And then secondly, it helps by a thing called running economy. If you're smoother because your core is more like, because your core is say stronger, like or more stable, rather than moving in left or right direction, all your energy is going in the one direction. So it's kind of like having the tires in your car pumped up to the optimal level. Everything is working efficiently, so it can help with that efficiency and help with that injury risk.
Yeah, and I think we were going to get into this later, but it's hard for me not to just get into it now too. What I use Pilates for with some of my runners, I had a gentleman who was in his early 40s who was a sprint triathlete. So for those who don't know what that is, it's a shorter version of a triathlon, but you're still running and biking and swimming. And he was unbelievable. He was in his early 40s and he made like the US national team for that age range. But he couldn't hold a plank for a minute because all he did was run and all he did was swim and all he did was bike, and he wasn't doing the things in the weight room to sort of like round out his body. In addition to that, you put someone on the reformer and you have them use some of the smaller muscles in their legs that the runners aren't typically using, right? If you put their feet up in the straps and have them make circles and do things, it was very challenging. And I think because runners are moving forward and backwards, right? Same plane of motion. And then you get them getting their hips moving around in more of a circular fashion. It gives them, I guess you would call it a more full body workout that they don't typically get when they're just running.
Yeah, so true, Steve. You've hit the nail on the head. And even that control, like when you're running, you can run with any technique. So there's never that level of precision. And that's why I like Pilates. Say, if you have the technique, strength training is unbelievable. But as you said, even from a coach's perspective, learning those cues, and then from just generally like athletic development perspective, like developing strength appropriately, learning how to control the body is massive. So that's why I start generally with like sports Pilates, because strength training would do the same and sometimes maybe even better idea for runners of, really activating the muscles. But I find that a lot of people, they can go in with the kind of same poor habits, like, maybe they arch their back a lot and they kind of go into this anterior pelvic tilt, which isn't really using the core, it's using the back muscles to stabilize. So it's better to take it back a step, as you said, and highlight where they're lacking control and where they're lacking, say, even range of motion at doing like circles with the hip, or being able to move through the hips while keeping the spine stable. So I like the Pilates for that kind of control, as you said, to highlight the efficiencies. And sometimes people are in the gym and people just assume they're doing things correctly, but they could be doing them completely incorrectly and causing more problems. So I do think it's really important to start with that baseline and then build up from there.
Do you consider running high impact? I don't even know if it necessarily matters, but a lot of exercises are sort of put into three different categories. No impact, low impact, and high impact. Maybe we consider plyometrics a high impact exercise. Maybe a low impact exercise would be something like a forward lunge where your foot is still hitting the ground, you're still pressing backwards. And then maybe a zero impact would be swimming or something, right? I don't know if that necessarily matters, and maybe sprinting is different than jogging, but do you consider running a high impact exercise, and is that a problem?
No, it's not a problem, but there's like repetitive impacts. And like, look, with distance running, if we're talking about 5Ks, 10Ks above, it's like any sport where one of the most frequent injuries is like stress fractures, it's going to be more to the high impact. And it's just that repetitive, sometimes like high impact can be quite good. Like the Russians used to do a lot of jumps with their younger athletes because that like high impact can actually nearly stimulate stimulate the bone growth. It's nearly like people, sometimes if you have someone you just don't get on with at all and they're very like in your face, you kind of recognize to do something like that, and the body can adapt to that stress because it's so obvious. Where if you have someone who just is like a little bit of a grind, you don't realize that they're just draining your energy. And it's the same sometimes with running. The impacts are smaller, but because there's so many of them, it can lead to issues. So I would say kind of repetitive medium impact, and that can be an issue because it's not enough to really stimulate the bone growth, but it's enough to kind of wear it down, and that's where we get these stress fractures, or as you said, the tendons get overloaded, the ligaments or the joints get overloaded.
Yeah, such a great point to say it's repetitive impact, and maybe that is actually more damaging than high impact, right? Doing 5 jump squats as opposed to running 13 miles, right? So like maybe you're jogging slowly at a 10-minute mile pace, running 13 miles, but you have constant competitive impact. It's really, my analogy that I make, I'm someone who's a martial artist. In the UFC, they have really small gloves. So if they're 4-ounce gloves, so when you get hit in the face, you have a really high likelihood of getting knocked out, right? Many more knockouts in the UFC than in boxing. Now, the people think that's terrible. Like, oh my God, this guy got knocked out. What they don't understand is a knockout is your brain's way of telling you, oh, it's time to shut down. This isn't good. In a boxing glove with 14-ounce gloves, you might get hit 400 times in a boxing match and never go out. And that constant shaking of the brain is way worse for you than getting knocked out long term. We know that now. So I like how you said the repetitive hit of your heel hitting the ground in these strikes could potentially be more damaging than just, let's say, a few jump squats. So we don't need to just say high impact or low impact. It's what is this doing long term, and is it repetitive?
That's such a great analogy. That is the perfect analogy in that like, is it better to get hit by that smaller glove? Because if you do 5 jumps, provided you have a base, it can be enough to stimulate, like, because as long as you don't injure yourself doing the jump, and you'll probably be a bit stiff and sore afterwards, that can stimulate better changes. One thing I always recommend people to do is skipping, like jumping rope. Because what's great about a jumping rope is that it's a self-limiting exercise. If you can't do it correctly, you just keep hitting the rope. So one, allows you to gradually increase. But 2, it's like those kind of impacts are a bit more deliberate. They're higher than your normal jog. You have to have more of a lift off the ground. and it can really stiffen the arch and kind of cause the adaptations that we want to see. So as you said, that's a great analogy, I think, of the boxing versus the UFC. Sometimes we're worried about these one-time events, which we do have to be careful with,
Sure.
but it's the longer just tipping at it can be the bigger issue.
Biomechanically, can everybody run? 100 different people come to Eoin and they say, hey, I want you to be my running coach. I want you to train me a little bit in Pilates, and I want to start to learn how to run properly. My goal is to run a 5K. And they're all different body types. And let's say they're ages 15 to 55. Is there some people who you're just going to say, hey, listen, I just don't think running is for you, whether it's a weight issue or a biomechanical issue structurally, or do you think that there's some way that you can get them to function as a runner?
Most people I would say okay, but as you said, maybe if you're very like overweight, haven't ran ever, or maybe have like say chronic calf issues or anytime you go running. So it's hard to give a definitive there. If someone came who was overweight, hadn't ran in a number of years because of calf issues, was like obese now, I think it'd be better to maybe go low impact, like swimming, cycling, and then introducing little bits of running and gradually progress that. Even for people who aren't used to it, like some people always want to do marathons, but they don't have that base level of conditioning. Now, look, I wouldn't recommend that, but if they do, if I have people who just want to get around it for some reason, a lot of times if they do like their like 2 workout runs in a week, their long run, which should be a long run, will be a long cycle. So we're changing, you're kind of taking things out. So you might only be running 2-3 times a week because your body just won't be able to sustain that kind of longer running. So we'll go into cycling for that person. But in general, can anyone improve? Yeah, generally, like we're built for running or walking anyway. But again, you need to be, if you haven't ran in a while, maybe one of those couch to 5Ks are a great start. Including cross training in the program. So you're losing weight, you're allowing like adequate recovery time, and then gradually over time see can you build up the running that you're doing. The other thing is, will we all run the same? No. Is that an issue? I don't think so. Too often we're always, I don't know what it is about humans, we're all looking for the quick fix, or if I want to get better at my 5K. I'll tell you a good thing. I had a friend now he won't mind me saying because I was slagging him big time. He's a high school friend and we just met for a coffee. He's a doctor and I would get on great and we were just chatting. He's like asking me about running. He's got two kids and he's busy, so he's only going running once every 2 weeks. Now there was a lot he was doing wrong. The first was when he was going out, he was trying to just run as hard as he could for 5K. That's just, and you see that a lot with amateurs. They're going way too hard on that run. So what I asked him to do was, maybe go easier, like jog for a little bit and then do certain little sessions or workouts and then come home. It's easier overall, and it's more enjoyable rather than go out as hard as you can or pick it up and dying and every day it's a workout. Second though, he was asking me about like breathing techniques. He'd been listening to the Joe Rogan about if I breathe this way with a double breath, or running techniques, should I be on my toes? I'm like, dude, you're running once every 2 weeks. There's no technique, there's no breathing. There's just like, you need to get out more regularly for running. So too often people are like, what will I do for my running stride to improve my running? And where the actual answer is, you need to train better. You need to then give yourself the building blocks so you don't get injured, and your body will figure out the actual running technique stride element.
Yeah, that's really funny. It actually, I was laughing also because it reminds me of myself and a lot of other people with golf. It's like, well, when's the last time you played? Like 3 months ago, but I've been watching YouTube videos on how to fix my swing. It's like, well, if you went out and played and hit some balls, you would probably have a better chance of fixing your swing rather than just watching a video for that secret tip to help
exactly. Yeah. You can spend years looking for this. Like there's, as you said, if you look at the top golfers, it's just repetitive actions. And they don't all swing the same. Yes, there's basics and things you can do, but and golf is actually way more technical than running. Do you know what I mean? So there is things you can get in there, but again, even like Bob Atara, he's like one of the main like psychologists / swing coaches, say for Padraig Harrington. My boss would have worked, like he was his strength and conditioning coach for Padraig Harrington. But like his advice always was like, just look down the course. Don't worry about your tech. Like he was like, just you've been practicing. If you're swinging a lot, just look down and hit the ball, and don't overthink the actual. Because your subconscious is actually working things out way more than your conscious, and if you do it consciously, you actually can get yourself more into trouble.
Yeah, and most sports, because the ball is moving, people don't have that problem, right? So let's say in a sport like, football or soccer, European football, American soccer, when someone is kicking you the ball and through, let's say, a through pass, and you're ready to score that goal, you're not breaking the motion down. You're not saying, I need to plant my left foot here. I need to swing my right foot here. I need to make sure I make contact with this part of my foot. You're just doing it, right? Because the ball is moving and you're acting in like sort of subconsciously. In American football, when you're being chased down by a defender and you're a quarterback, you're rolling out and you're not thinking about how you're holding the ball and how you're releasing it. You're just throwing it. But in golf, because the ball's not moving, you're overanalyzing what is going on. And that's what in running, so that sort of leads to my next question. Of course, you can talk about the golf too, but it leads to my next question on running. For me, I've never thought about my stride. I'm not a big runner. Some days I'll go out and run 1 mile as fast as I can. Some days I'll just jog 3 miles. I've never thought about my stride, but I hear people talk about, oh, to be a better runner, you have to change your stride and perfect your stride and slow your stride down and use all these different tempos and gadgets. What are your thoughts on that? Is that important?
No, you're doing it right. There's no, first thing on the golf that I find interesting is like, in like penalty shootouts in like European football, or even like golf or any like closed skill, what they found was beginners focus on each step, like where to put their foot. And like that's how you learn. And as you become an expert, you then focus externally on what you're meant to do, and you can just process. But in high stress environments, like say the last kick of an American football game, or like a big golf shot when you have it on,
or a penalty kick.
What can happen in the brain is you revert. So you actually then start thinking, okay, I just need to do this correctly. And by doing that, by going through the steps, you actually go back to like a beginner skill level, because you're processing it like a beginner, rather than just going like, I always just like in free play, I just hit it. Or if you just normally, you would just like hit it to where you wanted to go. And it's the same with running. It's like, there's loads of different running strides. I think this became a big thing a while ago. It's kind of died down now, but people worry about like on their toes or head steady. You need just building blocks. You should never be ever thinking about how you're running. All you should be thinking about is like looking down into the way you're going. I always like, a couple of things I would do is like try to imagine if someone was watching me, like externally. It's like, do I look smooth, easy, relaxed? That's all I always say to myself: smooth, easy, relaxed. Some external cues you can do is like, imagine you were running on a cloud, so you will be just naturally light. But the less like mechanically you're going into it. Like you've been running, or you've been walking or running since you're about like 2 years old, walking since 1. So, your body's figuring this out for us. The reason why people can run poorly sometimes is we don't have the mobility. We don't have like the basic activation. So our knees are buckling in, so we just need to work on the strength of muscles. And then the last thing is like motor control. So you can do like drills, can be great, like high knee drills, strides after a run, just so you get used to like what it's like to run quicker. And then that will naturally transfer into your running.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I have heard, I don't know if it was a physical therapist or a runner's coach, but basically I was working with someone. She was in, let's say, her mid 40s, and she was trying to run her first 10K. And they kept telling her that her stride was way too big and that she was going to have knee issues because of this long term. So she used this gadget that basically shortened her stride. And it basically, I guess it was like a sound. And every time your foot hit, maybe it sort of synchroned with the sound, like what do they call it? Like a metronome almost, right? When you're playing a guitar. And I'm not sure if it was successful ever for her in the long run. She didn't have knee issues, but she was just trying to avoid issues. She was doing this as like preemptively to make sure during this running stint that she didn't get it. But to me, it sounded like a bunch of things that just were added in that didn't need to be added in. And, it's good to have your take on it, someone who is a lifelong runner and helps people run, to say, sometimes these gadgets are a little bit too much. We just need to listen to our bodies.
Yeah, 100%. There is a thing of a cadence is best if it's like 180, but there's things you could do. Like maybe she could do a couple like, hill sprints, or if she wanted to do that as like a little drill. But just when she's running, like again, like this lady's probably just getting ready for fitness. She's training maybe 5 times a week max. It's like it's just excessive, and it's not really needed. So it's kind of gone a little bit more like less than it used to be. But yeah, for a while there was a massive trend on how to run, and I just think it so underestimates the power of the subconscious and the power of evolution to naturally do what we're meant to do. I don't think you have to consciously think about it. I think your body generally, if it's not running in a certain way, there's for a reason. Like, I'll give an example. When I was a junior, we would have gone to the European competitions, and it just so happened that the two guys who would be running against me at my age, because Ireland is small, one of them was the European champion, and the second guy was silver, which was just like, unbelievable for us, beating all like Spanish. But like the guy who was second, he never even won provincial titles. He never won any real event because the other guy would beat him all the way up to the European level. So the guy who won was really just naturally light on his feet. Like, he just was really like a toe striker. He had a beautiful stride. The other guy more was like on his heel. So what he tried to do was change his stride to match what the other guy looked like. So he just forced himself to like run on his toes all the time. And he did it for like a year or two. And then by 21, he had to have like double Achilles tendon surgery and never really ran again. Because there's a reason your body's, if there was an ideal way for you to run, your body wants to be the most efficient. It doesn't want to stress itself. So it will work out what's best for you. If you have all the building blocks, if you're actually tired from work, or you have those muscles have got weak or inactive, yes, they need to be switched on. Yes, you can do drills, but after that, leave it, because you're going to get yourself most times into more trouble doing that, I think, than fixing issues.
Yeah, I echo those thoughts. And just to go back to what we said before, there's a lot of people who train like the pros who don't need to, right? So it's like, it's the golfer who's trying to work on the flop shot, but he's a 20 handicap. It's the runner who's trying to, get that, I forget what you just call the cadence, exactly perfect. But, they run a 10-minute mile. It's like, well, you're not there yet. You don't need those things. You need to spend the time running and just getting better, and don't worry about all these things, these little 1% things to get you better that the Olympians are worried about. You just need to get out there.
That's 100. You couldn't put it better like that. Like, that's what I'm saying. Even my friend, he's running every 2 weeks. What do I do? It's like, you can't, there's nothing you're going to do running once every 2 weeks that's going to work. Like, your thing is the best thing you could do is run once every week. That's double it up, and then try double that up again. So it's so true. It's like all the time people are doing this, and maybe then they're not doing 2 workouts in a week. They're not structuring their training correctly. And there's like a million things they should be getting to before this.
So we talked about how Pilates can be very helpful for runners. We both agree with that. We both worked in a Pilates background to help runners. What are some maybe strength training exercises that you see runners do that you don't think are helpful, or that you think that maybe they believe are helpful and they're doing them, but they could replace it with something else? Now, I know this is a loaded, long question. I will say this, and I'm sure you agree with this. All exercise is good exercise. So we don't need to say that this thing is bad, but what could they replace it with that could be better?
That is such a good question, Mike, or Steve, sorry. That is such a good question, because I literally had an answer loaded that I get asked, like, what's the best exercise? But yeah, what's the one to avoid? Every exercise is good, as you said. I feel, though, if I had to get rid of one, it would probably be the deadlift, just because the technique is terrible for a lot of people. It's like what we were talking about with the golfer or the thing. We hear like, oh, this is which is a great exercise when done correctly. But a lot of people are doing that incorrectly and kind of hurting themselves. So you want to just be careful with it. I think that one, and I would probably replace it with like a single leg deadlift. So you're standing on one leg, bring your leg back, and as soon as the back leg stops lifting, you stop lowering your body. It's just it's hitting the same thing. It's like one-legged versus 2, and it's easier to control. pushing your hips back. People, that hinge action, can really struggle with. It's something I really try teaching the Pilates and getting on your feet, but it's something that people can struggle with. I'm working on this product called the back aware belts to give people that awareness, because like in the gym, that's the one exercise I see, that deadlift, where people are just rounding at their back or moving at their back a lot. The second thing I would say is make the exercise easier. So say for a plank, you should be able to kind of like arch your back, round your back. So like moving the pelvis and then to find the middle. And if you can't do that, drop back down, like, drop to your knees. Can you move your pelvis and then find the middle and then hold it there? Another one I think is people maybe like doing like plank for a longer time or in a poor position and not having that control, So I think it's more important to make the exercise easier and feel like I'm confident doing this than it is doing something harder, but like not doing it correctly.
Yeah, that's great information. And I think, as we get older, one of the goals, it doesn't seem to ever be the goal, but it should be to be a better form weightlifter and exerciser, not necessarily lift more weight. So the goal for most people, let's say we'll just take the deadlift, is that, last year I was at 345. This year I want to deadlift 385. You never hear someone say, last year I was deadlifting in this particular way. I want to make sure that I really have good pelvic control and that I'm engaging the proper muscles and that I'm pushing out on my feet and that I'm not rounding my back and that I'm not interior tilting, and that I feel my core and I'm bracing properly. They don't try to get better. They just try to add more weight, and eventually that leads to injury, right? If your only goal is to go to more weight, there's going to be a weight in which there's a diminishing returns. You're not going to be able to hit it, and you're going to get hurt, most likely. So I think it is important, and I know you work with some older people as well, that, especially as we get older, the goal should be to be a better, more efficient exerciser or runner, not necessarily add weight.
Yeah, 100%. And even when you're younger, because you'll know if you have any injuries, like this, like I feel like I'm a good physio. But the sad thing is like once you have an injury, you're kind of managing that. Like, so I have like my right hip's been sore, my left, like I've gone over badly, my left ankle, my left knee can get sore. Now I have no pain at the moment, but I know if like they're always now a little bit weaker than the other areas. So if you do stuff like if you hurt your back younger, yes, you can fix it, but you'll always have to just manage that. So it's a thing of, as you said, Al Vermeil, he won the NFL and the NBA as a strength and conditioning coach. He is that hierarchy where it's like, get good movement first, then work on like work capacity or anatomical adaptation, get your body adapted, which would be like, if you're doing like, say, hinging actions for a deadlift, you're doing like 15 reps, 3 sets, short recovery with that good form. If you're doing like inverse row underneath a bar, pulling your chest up, keeping the core engaged, but you're doing a lot more reps. And with that, then you're going to do less weight. But what that's doing is it's adapting the tendons, it's getting the core stronger. It's allowing like the architecture of your body to be built to allow you then to build strength, which then is the next level. But you don't want to go for that max strength without that underpinning like work capacity, the ability to tolerate the load, or without the movement base underneath that. And that's sadly, sometimes people can go, okay, well, I started at this weight and then I move on. And they're like forgetting the other 2 levels that need to precede that to make sure that you're developing effectively.
Yeah, it's a great point with the movement base. And I'll just add to that. There's another component, which is the mental component, right? So we have the neurons, the afferent neurons that are firing and the proprioception. So it's not just even like the musculoskeletal system. It's the ability for your brain to sort of process in space where your body is. Let's just take a simple technique like a dumbbell chest press. Well, if you watch me do a dumbbell chest press, you'll notice that I've been doing them basically my entire life or half of my life. Somebody else, you might not see that, right? They're going to be shaking a little bit. Their arms aren't at the right angle. I can close my eyes and do it with perfect form because I'm not looking at what I'm doing. I feel my body in space. My brain and my muscles are coordinating with one another to know where I'm pushing. And I think, like you just said, unless you're doing hundreds and hundreds of repetitions of these things with a little bit of load, prior to putting on load, you're not going to be in a, let's call it an advantageous position to avoid injury, and you're more likely to get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's three things that cause someone to move poorly or have poor technique. The first is like mobility, like the joint doesn't move well or a flexibility issue. The second reason is like, as we talked before, like they physically can't like switch on the core correctly or engage the glutes or get the shoulder blades in the right position. Like those muscles aren't working. And then the third is what we call motor control. And that's the technique that you're talking about, Steve. That's the idea of like just knowing, having that awareness of your body in space to allow you to do that. And once you have the movement, then you need time just to like get your tendons and your joints used to those movements, and then you can start building strength. It's like, look, we're always looking for little shortcuts, and I found like I run my best when I'm feeling like generally strong, I'm feeling flexible, and I'm aerobically fit. I seem to run way better than when I just tend to run, be aerobically fit, but feeling stiff and sore or not as strong as I want to be. When I'm overall feeling like generally like well-rounded, I run my best. That's when I seem to run my best. I feel I can do anything.
This is a question specifically about you, so you don't have to give this advice as if it's for someone else. I just want to know what goes through your mind personally. Let's go ahead and say you're not training for something and you're just going out on a run. And you are 90 seconds in and you're like, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm a little sluggish. My legs feel heavy. And your goal was to, let's say, run, I don't know, 7 miles. You're like, I don't think this is going to happen today. Do you just not do it? Do you still tell yourself, screw it, Owen, you're a lifelong runner. You're going to get to the 7 miles. How do you sort of adapt and change in those situations?
Do you know, like you're the same, Steve, I can see by you that you work out. Do you know, it's like things become such a habit that that scenario just wouldn't happen. Do you know what I mean? If I was sick, it would probably, no, it wouldn't. Like, even if, what would happen there is maybe it would never be like 90 seconds in. I've had it maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, and I've had like the flu, I had COVID. That was the second time it happened. Wow. Where I was 20 minutes in and you know when you're dying. Like I was like, I was never felt bad. So I just went home then and didn't run for probably 2 weeks. I was just in bits. But in terms of like just feeling stiff or sore, no, I never, like I would just stay running. Like I would just do the time that was meant to. Now I might cheat at the end of some runs if I was busy. Like, so say if I was going to do 70 minutes, now that it's more just for general fitness, I might stop at like 65 if I got to the car, or 60, but do we never have, it's so ingrained. Like once you get used to it, it just would never happen. It wouldn't even be a thing. I heard a guy talk about this one time, and I haven't articulated this, so I don't know how it'll come out, where like if you give yourself sometimes like a slight option, so he was talking about like Gatorade versus like car fluid, like, so like the one that you put in for your wipers, call them wipers, yeah. Like, 100% you cannot drink wiper fluid. Like you'll get poison yourself. So there's never even like, if it's like, if the answer is 100%, you don't even ever question, is this the thing I can do? So he's like, with the Gatorade, you're like, oh well, maybe on special occasions or this or that. No. It's like that. If the answer is 0, it'll never come up. So no, that's never happened. It's never that I'm like, I'm not feeling this run, I'll go home. That's never happened, because you just after a while, it just doesn't happen. I think the key thing to do is start writing it in and writing down your training, when you're going to do it. I think the thing that most people struggle with is, I see it with the Pilates, we give a free trial to people. I'm not joking, Steve. Like, to get 1/3 of the people even to try the free trial, like to try the class, they've signed up, they want to do it, but it's just like they haven't set a time to do it. So a week just flies by, and that can be with all training. So I think if you're new to training, you need a time. Like, I have all my training always written down, so I know what I'm doing, and then it's just easier. Like, it's always planned, so you're kind of out the door. And then once I get out the door, I think most people are like that. I think most people will just grind it out. I think where they won't do it is get out the door. They'll be like, I'm feeling stiff and sore, or I'm really wrecked today, I won't go out, I'll go tomorrow. I think once you're out, for me personally, it's never been an issue. I know you just kind of grind through a run. I wouldn't run hard or anything, but I would always do it. That was meant to be a short answer. I know we went
No, that it reminds me of, I had a conversation with Dr. Prologo, who is a obesity medicine specialist on my podcast, and he wrote a book called The Catching Point. And what he talks about is, for someone who is, let's say, obese, they haven't got to that aha moment or that catching point. And that's what you just described. You've done it so many times. You getting out of bed, putting on your running shoes and going out the door, whether it is raining out, it's a little bit colder than you anticipated, whether maybe your ankles were a little bit stiffer from the day before, whatever it is, you've done it so many times that it's really not that difficult for you, right? So like you completing an 8-mile run, you don't like, it's not like you come home and brag to people, right? This is just nothing for you at this point, right? You've done it so many times that you're past that catching point, that aha moment. But we forget, people like you and me, how difficult it is for people who are starting up, right? So that person who hasn't done that yet, they're going to have to put the time in and force themselves to do it. And I think really where some fitness professionals miss out on in having honest conversations with their clients is, yeah, you got to put some hard work in, but it gets easier. This gets easier. All of this gets easier. At some point, you're not only is this easy, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to need it. It's cathartic. You're going to love doing it. You're going to look forward to doing this. You're not going to force yourself to write down the time on your calendar you're going to be running. It's the first thing you're going to write down, and you're going to push everything else to the side, and you're going to fall in love with it. You just have to get past that catching point. And I think it's it's imperative that we, people like us, explain that to our clients who are nervous about taking that first step out the door.
That's so funny. I literally was helping this guy on a couch to 5K thing. He just wanted me to introduce it, just with my running background. And I literally said the same thing to those people. I used the analogy of like a rocket. If you think a rocket, it has to use so much energy to break the atmosphere. And then when it's out of the atmosphere, it's easier. Because so often we can all emphasize the benefits of exercise. And what can happen is someone's 2-3 weeks in and they're like, I'm feeling, oh, they said I'd have more energy. I'm feeling really tired because it's a new energy expense. They said I'd feel like, better in myself. I'm really stiff and sore and my muscles are sore. So yeah, I would, and that's what I said to him. I was like, guys, you're going to feel like crap for the first 3 weeks of this. But as it goes over time, and it's nearly imperceptible, you're like, oh, I'm actually feeling a lot better, or I'm sleeping better because I'm exercising and stuff. So yeah, I can totally agree with you. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's a cultural problem, at least, in America, and I'm sure it expands out to where you are too, where you have these like influencers, like the Instagram influencers, and people who are like very braggadocious about what they do. They're like, oh, I wake up at 5 a.m. and then I have a protein shake and I go to the gym and then I do that and then I drive my kids to here and I do this and do this. It's like, yeah, so do I. But like, it's not really that difficult because I've been doing it forever. And it's something I like to do. I choose to do it. I don't have to do it. Like this helps me. I'm a better person. I feel more lucid, clear of mind. I feel more fit. I can eat what I want if I'm working out. Like these are all benefits, and people describe them as if they're like, I don't know, like digging holes all day long for no money. It's like, no, what you're doing is at this point is just like when Owen goes out on a run. It's just another day. And I think we have to, continue. Like you said, I love that rocket ship. That's like the imagery of the rocket, right? Taking so much energy and all the fire coming out of it to get up. And then once it breaks the atmosphere, it's literally just floating in gravity. That's how we are. We're just floating in gravity once you put the hard work in.
Yeah, big time. And I think sometimes with the influencers as well, and with us all, we can kind of get, because people always ask me, like, what's the best time to stretch, or what's the best time to run, or what's the best time to exercise? And I can give answers, but a lot of times my answer is whenever you can do it. Like I think sometimes we're looking at people on Instagram or, and they're like, as you said, getting up at 5:30, and they're like, I'm not getting up at 5:30. Okay, well that, like, just whenever you can do it. The other thing as well, just remember, sometimes you can look at even the times or people and think, oh, well, what's the point? I'll never look like that. And it's like, yeah, but you can be kind of skewed by that, because remember, there's 2 billion people on Instagram. So like 50 years ago, you would be comparing yourself to other people in your town and thinking, yeah, like I'm in good shape compared to that person, or yeah, I'm okay here and I'm going to stay exercising. Now you're comparing yourself to the top like 5% probably of people in out of 2 billion. I couldn't even work out the numbers on that, like of like whatever 100 million you have to be better than to have that type of body. So, you know, I think two things. I think just do it whenever you can. And then just remember that if they have these routines or whatever, that you're looking at maybe the top X routine of 2 billion people. Like that's probably not normal for most people.
Yeah, and with the times, sometimes what that does is create another, what we call in the business world, a barrier to entry. Because if I tell you, oh, the best time is 5 a.m., and you're like, well, can't do it at 5 a.m. because I have X, Y, and Z. Well, now you don't have to run.
Yeah, so exactly. That's exactly it.
You're creating another barrier to entry. The best thing to say when a client asks me that, I say, why? Why do you want to know this? And then they have to think about this. They're like, well, I'm deciding between, you know, if I should wake up early or if I should do it when I get home from work. And I say, well, try both, you know? Try a week at 5 a.m. and then try a week at 6 p.m. See what works better for you. But don't try to wiggle your way out of this. You'll find a time. Like it doesn't necessarily matter. It's like, and you know, and like you said, that's such a hard question to answer because we're all so different, right? My wife cannot work out in the morning, so she makes it a point to work out at night. I can't work out at night, so I make it a point to work out in the morning. And it's no workout is more effective or less effective. It's just what suits us best given our predispositions for, you know, how we go about our day. So
yeah, spot on.
Well, this was a fantastic conversation. Why don't you give my audience and listeners some insights into where they can find you? Oh, and whether maybe they want to reach out to you personally. They have some questions about what you do in the running world and the Pilates world and exercise science and things of that nature. Or, you know, maybe if they're personal trainers, or maybe there's someone who wants to work with you in a program. So anywhere in which people can find you. Yeah,
thanks a million, Steve. I really enjoyed this. This is really, really enjoyable. everardpilates.com/book. So EVERARDPILATES.com/book. I have a free book there called How to Get to the Line in the Best Shape Possible. So it just gives like a lot of articles I've done. I'm working on this other project called the backawarebelt.com. It's a wearable technology that gives you instant feedback on your back position. It's not 100% ready yet, but I just want to start maybe telling people about that because I've been working on this for like 3 years and I need to start hopefully seeing it and seeing what they think. So yeah, Steve, I really enjoy this. Thanks a million.
Well, I promise you once that is fully launched, we'll come back on. We'll talk about that product and how exactly it works. Thank you so much for joining the TrulyFit Podcast.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that'd be brilliant. I'd love to do that, Steve, because yeah, I have a lot of trials and tribulations on that project. It's been interesting, but it's time and money suck as well. So labor of love.
We'll chat soon.